Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the second day of the decade of digital inclusion, wherever you are around the world. I'm Sir David Payne, Chairman Emeritus of the Marconi Society. I'm also the Director of the Optoelectronics Research Centre at the University of Southampton in the UK. I'm proud to be part of this nearly 50-year-old non-profit with a vision for a connected world where information and communications technologies empower everyone to reach their full potential. Our programs and awards celebrate innovators in our field and support national progress and international progress towards digital equity. Please visit us at www.marconisociety.org to learn more about our work and to consider supporting our worthy programs. Today, we're focused on the intersection of technology, policy, and digital inclusion, because it's only together that we can provide the opportunities for connectivity for everyone in the world. We have a dream team of experts today discussing everything from the role of fintech in equitable growth to the next generation of internet business models to the fair and inclusive use of AI. We'd like to thank our partners for the event, the Institute for Business and Social Impact at Berkeley House, and the Center for Effective Global Action, also here at UK Berkeley. Many thanks also to the Internet Society, who is live streaming our event around the world. Mostly, thank you to the speakers, panelists, and moderators at the heart of this entire event. Feel free to share information as the event is happening by using the hashtag DODI22 and call out the Marconi Society at Marconi Society and Willie. So let's jump in to today's discussion. What is digital equity and why is it important? The definition of digital equity is variable, but essentially it is about what is necessary for all individuals to have the information capacity for full participation in society and the economy. And for those of us fortunate enough to live in democracies, to engage in the democratic process. It has three key pillars: internet access, that is the connection to the global internet, the devices that we are going to use to make that connection, such as your mobile phone, the laptop, your TV even, and of course, digital literacy. And that last is a major component of what we will be talking about today. To have the knowledge to know how to operate the internet, the software that drives it, and the device that you're using. This leads us to access to essential services such as healthcare, employment, lifelong learning. Now, this panel asks the question, how can tomorrow's technology help to bring digital equity across the world? For which we will have to take a view on what the future has to bring. And it would be difficult to assemble a more expert panel than we have today, who are able to do that. We need to understand briefly how the internet actually works, and wireless, optical networking, and security. And to get a global viewpoint we have assembled an extraordinary panel here today. From the USA, we have Henry Samueli, the co-founder of Broadcom, the world leading designer of mobile phone chips. Marty Cooper, who is a pioneer of mobile telephony. From Iran, we have Siavash Alamouti, who is the 22 Marconi Fellow that we will be celebrating his achievements tonight. He is a coding expert. From Uganda, we have Joseph Kakande, who appears to be having difficulty joining us today. So there's a lesson in internet connectivity for us. We have from India, Aakanksha Chowdhery, who is a networking expert. From Egypt, we have Taher Elgamal, who is a cryptographer. And finally, we have myself, and I jumped continents because I was brought up in Africa, but have lived in the United Kingdom for many decades. I wanted to just give a couple of minutes to set the scene of where we are today on the hardware side. About 99% of the traffic in the global internet travels on optical fiber, which is under the sea, across the continents, over the mountains. I sometimes wonder why we call it the cloud. Because after all, most of the world's optical cables carrying all this are actually under the sea. So I'm going to propose that in future, we call it the digital ocean rather than a digital cloud. To put this into context, the entire internet traffic could be carried on one single fiber today. So together with the incredible developments in 5G, 6G, for the final drop for mobile applications in mobile telephony, we have an extraordinary capability of gigabits per second to every individual in the developed world, but we are here to talk about those that do not have access to them. We should not also ignore recent developments in things like Starlink, satellite technology, which is playing such an important point today in Ukraine. So what I think we are going to talk a little bit about is a solution which involves all of these technologies. So with that introduction, I'd like to now go to the panel. And what I'm going to ask the panel is to introduce themselves for 2 or 3 minutes and make a statement of what they think about where hardware in the global internet is going as an introduction. So let me start in no particular order with Henry Samueli. Henry, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Well, thank you, David. My pleasure to be here. First of all, my background real quick. I'm the co-founder and currently serve as chairman of Broadcom. And Broadcom develops semiconductors for broadband communications applications, last mile connections to the home, the internet infrastructure, Wi-Fi connections, et cetera. And obviously very, very involved in digital connectivity globally. And from my perspective, from a hardware perspective, we've made incredible progress over the last 10, 20 years on deploying internet to the masses. I believe today we're somewhere in the neighborhood of 60% connected globally. In the US, we're probably closer to 90%, but globally, I believe about 60% of people have some form of access to the internet, whether it's through their cell phone or network connection. And the interesting, so that leaves about 40% unconnected, which, it's about 3 billion people, still quite a large number of unconnected people. But another interesting statistic that I've seen is that the rate of connectivity year to year is growing very rapidly. And I believe we're on a clip right now of about 300 million new connections to the internet per year. And not that you can extrapolate that linearly, but let's just, for the sake of argument, extrapolate it. That means in 10 years, that would be another 3 billion connections, which would get us the rest of the way there. But of course, it's not going to be a linear progression. But the point is, we're not that far off of being able to connect the world to the internet. At least those that want to be connected. There are probably always some that may never want to be connected. And I may join that list pretty soon. I don't know. But anyway, I think from a technology perspective, we're making great progress getting people connected to the internet. Now, the issues of using the internet and privacy and authentication, those are lots of other issues we can talk about relative to equity and so forth. But at least from a hardware perspective, I think we've made great progress historically and are continuing to make great progress, driving the prices down as semiconductor costs decrease over time. So I'm optimistic that over the next 10 years, we'll get very close to universal connectivity.
Thank you, Henry. So I think embedded in your point is the extraordinary growth that we continue to experience. And this has been quite hard for a lot of us in the science and engineering to keep up with. And variously, traffic increases at 20 to 40% of the numbers that I've seen on an annual basis. And I'm sure we'll come back to that because that has some meaning in terms of digital equity. So I would like to go next to Marty Cooper, who has been having some problems getting in today. Which is ironic, isn't it, folks?
I'm in audio-wise, I'm not in video-wise, so you're just going to have to be satisfied with a picture of me.
That is a perfect picture. I love that picture, Marty.
Sorry about that. Well,
so over to you, Marty.
Yeah, thank you, Sir David. I know the subject of our session today is digital inclusion. I want to address the issue of the digital divide, specifically the digital divide in education. And I'll start with the following presumption. To achieve a complete education today, a modern student has to have full-time access to the internet or the equivalent of full-time access. Cable and Wi-Fi just don't hack it, they're inadequate. Would any of you give up your wide area coverage that you enjoy with your cell phone and restrict yourself to Wi-Fi? I don't think so. And yet the FCC has addressed the digital divide with an $84 billion subsidy for cable. Now, they also just recently withdrew $1 billion grant to Starlink in a further effort to close the digital divide. Cable nor satellite comes close to resolving the digital divide. Now, I'm not suggesting that alone, that having wide area coverage giving a student full-time access to the internet, that alone will not solve the digital divide. We have to recognize that our educational system has not kept up with technology. We have to recognize that students with full-time access to the internet have more information at their fingertips than our teachers could possibly provide. We have to understand that the role of the teacher needs to add teaching the skills that help students discriminate between information and misinformation. But that doesn't relieve the society from providing full-time access to our students. There are schools that are already adopting these principles. There are schools that are giving students more voice in the details of their curriculum. They're encouraging students to collaborate, to focus on learning and adapting to their individual needs instead of having a rigid curriculum. Now, I know some of you are thinking, are our children going to use this freedom to play games, to chat with friends? Of course they will. But a recent study concluded that children who played games for 3 hours a day had better problem-solving ability than those who didn't play games at all. So let me close by summarizing some of the things that need to be done to solve the digital divide. First, there are areas of the US and of course other countries in the world that have inadequate coverage. Believe it or not, we don't know exactly where these areas are, even though there are tools that can allow us to do that. So we have to introduce those tools. And then we have to make sure that we can cover every area of our country. So tools to do that, things like smart antennas. Siavash is a pioneer in this area and knows that that is very possible. There is no reason why we can't economically serve every area of the country, including the most rural areas of the country. Secondly, our educators have to teach their constituency that the internet is a gold mine of wonders. They have to make children understand that educational programs are more engaging, more interesting, more enjoyable than the games that they play. A lot of this software already exists, but education is important enough to our future. We need to spend as much money on education as we do on games. There's a long way to go in that area. And finally, we have to recognize if we don't solve the educational digital divide seriously, we'll find ourselves facing the specter of a new kind of division, of a generation of smarter, more engaged citizens who have been educated the modern way, in contrast with those who have not had the benefit of technology-based learning. That division is simply unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. I too heard that report on 3 hours a day of gaming improving our kids' education. I kind of wondered whether that 5 hours or even 10 hours would be even better then. So, Aakanksha, I'd love to have a view from you, coming as you do from with an Indian background, a very different perspective on the world, I think, and I am aware of some major initiatives to improve connectivity in India. So over to you. Introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Sir David. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been a networking expert, and more recently, I've been working in the area of AI at Google. But I would like to say on the area of digital inclusion and digital literacy is that in the Indian subcontinent, one of the major ways we have accelerated connectivity or seen major progress is through wireless. And thanks to a lot of the innovations by folks in this room, wireless has been easier to reach in the far ends of the Indian subcontinent, where getting landline access to internet has been challenging to every single corner. And mobile phones have often been the way through which folks are able to get connectivity. So lot of progress has been made in that area. And yet, just like Marty mentioned so far, there is still a lot more to do in terms of bridging this digital divide, because the amount of content you can get on internet and what's possible, that digital divide is still there. So there is a whole generation of folks who do not have access to education and what's possible in terms of opportunities, economic and otherwise, which folks who have better education possibilities and full access to internet do. So this digital divide aspect in Indian subcontinent plays out even more because if you only have cell phone access, you have at least you have connectivity, but you don't have the same level of internet access as folks who have full-time internet and can personalize their education and can get better access to resources that can help them. So I think I second Marty's point around that. The other aspect I want to add from Indian subcontinent is that there is a lot of effort that goes into infrastructure building. So a lot of infrastructure initiatives take much longer. So satellite communication has also been accelerated a bit more in the recent years because of having to lay out infrastructure is a major initiative. So that's the other aspect, to reach out to further corners of the country that are not connected at all.
Thank you, Aakanksha. One thing that I have often wondered, and I'm sure you can answer for me, is for us English speakers, we take it that the internet is in English, but of course it's not, and certainly not for persons in the villages in India, for example. So to what degree does that limit the digital equity of the internet?
That's a great question. So that definitely limits the access to content on internet. You can talk to another person who might be able to over a cell phone, but you cannot quite get the same level of content as the English-speaking population. And resources which are able to translate, and not to mention Google Translate, have been useful not just in terms of getting content, but you will find that when someone wants to go get a job, most of the population prefers English-speaking candidates. So even that divide starts to play out. So yes, English content limits the digital equity in a lot of ways, and multilingual content through whatever services are available is challenging.
So David, if I could interject,
Yes, please.
In a perfect world, there would be a dedicated internet just for education, a dedicated internet even for different languages. So there's we already have separate internets for things like the legal profession. So if we really respect how important education is, why not have a curated internet so we don't have to worry about children watching pornography and playing games? So I think we don't give enough emphasis to how important education is.
Thank you for that, Marty. I think we might come on later to the question of walled internets and whether the time has come to do that. Some countries do it already, we know that. I'd like to now move to Taher Elgamal to introduce himself and to put his position on digital equity. Taher.
Thanks, Sir David. It's a pleasure to be here with this esteemed group of people. As you mentioned, I actually did grow up in Egypt, although I've been living in the US for 40 some years. So I kind of bring both sides of the story here. I look at the digital world as more profound than other advances in technology in the past. It's in fact the beginning of a new digital society, if you wish. It allows people to interact directly across the oceans and across the countries. So in one way, we have the opportunity to fix the sins of the past, if you would like, to include people who have traditionally not been included. So the digital divide is in fact very, very profound, because it will actually leave behind people who do today have the opportunity to be included in this new society that we've been building for the last 2-3 decades. And not being included there would be a real mistake. We want to bring everybody around to join the civilization, the new digital economy, and to benefit from knowledge, from education, from interacting with others across the world. So it's both an amazing progress we're making in the world, but it also when we leave people behind, it will be even more profound than other technological advances that we've made in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Taher. I have heard you in the past refer to being a citizen or a cultural member of the internet rather than of your particular country. I really like that model. Perhaps you could say a couple of words on that.
Yeah, I am a citizen of the world, indeed. And I traveled everywhere there is to be traveled around the world, and I met people from all parts of the world. But the ability to actually picture ourselves in other people's shoes in different parts of the world who have limited resources is a very, very powerful thing. Part of it is that I did grow up in a third world country, and I was fortunate enough to land in the US and build a career here. But the understanding of what different people go through firsthand is actually very, very powerful. And that's sort of the fortune. I've been fortunate to be able to be in a situation like this and to participate in many different. And I actually do refer to myself as a citizen of the world publicly, as you know.
Thank you, Taher. So, last but far from the least, our 2022 Marconi fellow winner, Siavash Alamouti. So, Siavash, if you'd like to introduce yourself and give us an opening statement on your thoughts on digital equity.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sir David. And thanks for the congratulations for the award. I'm really honored. And thank the Marconi Society, Wendt, and the rest of the fellows. I'm glad to join you on your mission. Paul, I'm an executive chairman at Mimik Technology. We have pioneered the technology called hybrid edge cloud. This is something that I've been working on for the last 8 years to bring server capability to all devices. You can say cloud decentralization. But I started my career building mobile data protocols with CDPD. My passion for technology has always been for bringing affordable connectivity to masses. And you asked the question of hardware, as you said, the kind of fixed internet hardware has done amazingly great. And I think Wi-Fi has done amazingly great, but we're still very challenged when it comes to cellular communications. When we talk about digital divide, and by the way, I'm here in Oakland Hills. I haven't been to Iran for 40 years, although hopefully with what's happening in Iran today, I'll be able to go back after 40 years with the uprising in the fall of the Iranian regime. Perhaps I'll be able to go back to Iran. But I'm experiencing digital divide in Oakland Hills. It's hard to get good connectivity up here, let alone in other parts of the world. And that's to some extent because of the high cost of building cellular network. We spent, I think, Marty, myself, and a few others Even Henry's company, Broadcom, was to some extent helping. They would try to make cellular much more affordable. The reality is to get high data rates in all parts of the world, you need very dense networks. So the hardware cost for wireless equipment, it's still not there, right? You can get a Wi-Fi outdoor access point, for instance, for $1,000, a very good one. But for a small cell 5G, you have to pay still $10,000 to $15,000. So we have to close that gap on the cellular front. We tried to do that with a technology called mobile WiMAX years back, but unfortunately, although we managed to make it more affordable with LTE through that initiative, but still the cost of hardware equipment is very high, and that needs to be addressed, right? And that's one project that currently I'm working on. That's one. The second thing on digital inclusion is the fact that the driver for this, when we talked about digital inclusion and access to internet, it was for the days of, I think, starting with fixed internet when we got access to the web to download information, right? And then we went to mobile internet, where we started becoming the producers of data and information, meaning sharing videos, text, and all of that. That completely changed the way data travels. Obviously, a lot of uplink data traffic, and then also IoT. So that's one of the reasons that you go, for instance, on Bay Bridge and your call drops 3 or 4 times a day. They hadn't designed these systems for such a number of devices sending so much information. They're mostly downlink for downloading information. So those aspects need to be also taken into account, and the architecture of what we build needs to be addressed. And this is even more important for countries that currently do not have broad access to internet, because it has to be much more affordable in those countries. So the cost of equipment, the proper architecture of the design of internet, bringing both network and IT systems. You had people that work building networking equipment, and then have people that worked on cloud and the IT aspects. Separating these two has not been very effective. You talk about, for instance, 5G having latencies of 10 milliseconds, and then you have to send data to data centers hundreds of kilometers away, and passing through tons of equipment and getting massive latencies, for instance. So those are the type of things that we have to address. And also, as Marty eloquently described, there are more aspects than just obviously hardware that I'm sure, Sir David, you'll get to those. And those are also very important. But my focus in the last few years has been looking at the data as an enabler for affordability of internet. Because if you look at this hyper-connected world, the fuel of it is data. Just like in the first and second industrial revolutions, for instance, oil and coal were the fuel. In the hyper-connected world, where everything is going to get connected and everything needs to communicate seamlessly, data is that commodity, right? And that currently is being scraped, stolen, and people are not getting the share value. It's a really valuable commodity that if everybody could monetize, everybody could afford internet. And that's why I spent even a couple of years as the head of R&D at Wells Fargo to learn how to do that. So it really is about hardware, equipment, standards, affordability of devices, education on how to use internet, monetizing data for the rightful owners of data, the right business models of internet, and all of these have to be taken into account. And I kudos to Marconi Society for this symposium so that we can talk about all of these aspects, but we can't just address one and get to digital equity. Yeah.
Thank you, Siavash. You covered a huge amount of territory there. And thank you for that, because I think that gives us a launch pad for a number of other of the key questions which I'd like to address here. I'm going to go to a question which I alluded to in my introduction. If we are to worry and solve digital equity as we go forward, let's say in the next 10 years or so, and ask the question, what can we do in the hardware and the technology and software of the internet to improve digital equity? And I made the point that, of course, in order to answer that question, you need to have a view of what the internet looks like in 10 years' time. And how could I have a better panel of persons to stare into their crystal ball and tell me what you think that the internet is going to look like in 10 years' time? A couple of data points. We know the growth of traffic. I've already mentioned that. We know the rollout of optical fiber, for example, is about 500 million kilometers per year to join the 5 to 6 billion kilometers that already exist. And we know the number of mobile devices. We know about 5G and 6G, and we know about the rollout of new satellite in low orbit satellites, such as Starlink. And all of these are growing rapidly. So, Henry, I'm going to come to you unfairly. I thought you would probably be in a great position to give us a bit of a view about how you see the internet in 10 years' time.
Well, I think it's going to continue to evolve as a very heterogeneous network. I mean, you're always going to have the core of the internet clearly is fiber, as you point out, the capacities necessitate it. So the real question is last mile connections will still be a large variety, whether it's wired over copper or fiber to the home. You're going to have rural areas filled in by satellites, and low Earth orbiting satellites like Starlink are a great solution, even though currently we also have the geosynchronous satellites, but you have to deal with the latency issues there. But again, you know, there will be technologies available, and then there's a cellular overlay over everything, of course. So it's a matter of just continuing to drive the costs down of those connections, which naturally happens over time with all hardware technologies. They tend to get cheaper as the manufacturing gets more robust and in higher volumes. So I think, you know, I don't know that the internet's going to look that much different. It may function differently. I think there's going to be a lot of changes at the higher levels, the software, the protocols, the security, authentication issues, regulation. Now, those will all vary a lot and evolve a lot as, you know, society demands changes to how the internet operates. But at the lowest hardware level, I think it's going to be a regular evolution of what we have today. I don't see any revolutionary changes in the next 10 years. It's more evolutionary from my perspective.
Okay, graceful growth rather than revolution. And keeping up with the incredible demand for capacity is going to be quite a challenge. But so far, we've managed to keep up just fine. Before leaving you, Henry, any thoughts on what appears to be a growing tendency to wall off the internet, particularly in countries like Iran, China, to create a local internet which can be controlled?
Yeah, it's a challenge. You have both arguments in many different directions. Obviously, when you have a complete lack of control over the internet, then you get more bad actors having access and misbehaving. But then again, when you have too much control, then obviously the government decides what you get to hear and what you get to say. So it's a challenge. I don't know that we're ever going to find a solution to that problem that everybody's going to be happy with. I think having it be the Wild West where anything goes is not good either. But countries that tend to wall off, obviously, the information that their people get to hear is not necessarily reality. So I think we're going to need some government regulations, but I guess, I tend to lean on the more open side, but not too open where it becomes dangerous.
Thank you, Henry. I go to Marty next. The internet, what does it look like in 10 years' time, Marty?
My focus, David, is on the last mile, on the wireless part. I think what's going to happen is people are going to realize that the emphasis on 5G, 6G seems to be on millimeter waves. They're even talking about terahertz. And the real problem is in rural areas. And the same technology that makes terahertz and millimeter waves possible also can be used in rural areas in different ways. Smart antennas make what the last mile wireless connection much lower in cost, or can do that. And I think that is going to help us get universal coverage because we are far from being universal now. And as I mentioned before, we have the ability to know exactly what the coverage is because every cell phone measures the coverage of that cell phone. All we have to do is accumulate that information and we will be able to identify what the gaps in our coverage are, and yet we're not doing that. So I have strongly recommended to the FCC that they implement a program to do that, to actually figure out what the coverage is of wireless in our countries. But there's no doubt in my mind that technology can solve that problem economically, that we can provide wireless coverage for something less than $5 a month instead of the huge charges that carriers are doing today.
So, David, you're muted.
Yeah, Marty, so you see the future of the internet as more of the same, but at much reduced cost and more ubiquitous. Okay, I'm going to move on then to Aakanksha. The same question, what does the internet look like in 10 years' time?
I will weigh in completely from the application layer perspective. So I think there have been tremendous advances we have seen in the field of AI, and a lot of the AI that is happening today is sourced from the data that we have on internet, and we have language models that can go generate fluent text and image models that can generate images. So it would be interesting and fascinating as to how a lot of this generated content will influence the content that exists on the internet. So internet will not just be an amalgamation of data that we as humans generated, but also what we use is AI models to generate. Now, how can that positively influence? I think you asked me the question around multilinguality, and we touched around education, right? I think using these models to the benefit of generating multilingual content so that we have content in all languages is perhaps a positive way that these generated content can be evolved, and it would serve to bridge the digital equity. And for anything from education divide as well as economic opportunities. I mean, some of the examples of folks who want better economic opportunities need better education, need access to this kind of content. So I have positive hope that today the advances that we're seeing in AI will fundamentally enable more digital equity if we're thoughtful about the ways we use them in the generative content ways, like how they generate content.
Thank you, Aakanksha. Joseph Kakande from Uganda, unfortunately, has not joined us today, but I'm going to make a point for him because he often makes this point. But actually, Uganda is one of the most diverse countries in the world. It has 40 different languages in one small country. So that was what was behind my question. Right at the very beginning, which you've also picked up on, which is the importance of language on the internet. So thank you for that. Taher, I'm going to come to you next. What does the internet look like in 10 years' time, and will it have greater digital equity?
So yeah, thank you. Interesting question to think about. You know, I've been in the security world, you know, as CTO for security at Salesforce, and before that for a long time. So I'd like to focus on the word trust. I believe that the technologies that we are all working on will in fact allow people to reach the internet and get connected. There are a lot of factors why it is difficult to actually sometimes trust what you get from the internet. And if we allow that to just grow indefinitely, we may end up with a society that is not exactly what we're trying to build. So the combination of people who want to monetarily benefit from others unnecessarily, and from governments that want to control what their people can and cannot see or hear or participate in, is gonna probably end up with a collection of things kind of participating with each other. You know, the human society kind of usually succeeds. The mainstream will in fact succeed in providing trusted information and trusted connectivity to the vast majority of people. I believe there will be different places in the world, although they are digitally connected, that what they get from the connection is not exactly what we as building this society together want them to get. It's very easy to both poison the information that people get, as well as, you know, provide areas on the internet that are not actually safe. You know, I always make the example that we learn very young, at a very young age, that if we land in the middle of a city, our brains are trained to understand what a dangerous part of the city looks like. That is very difficult to do in the internet because it all looks the same effectively. So although we actually all know this, I think 10 years is probably a good time frame that, you know, we will be able to help people who are connected to differentiate between what's trusted and what is not trusted. There is enough entities that are connected to each other and working with each other that will hopefully help individuals who just want to get the truth about whatever subject they want, be able to obtain the truth. You're muted, Sir David.
Sorry, folks. So your point, I think, is an interesting one, is that we need to learn to recognize the bad lands of the internet. And there's no shortage of those, it would seem. Do you see a role for AI in being able to recognize those bad lands?
Yeah, AI is one of these fantastic technologies that can go both ways. So it is actually very important that we can use AI in a way that will kind of curate information to people that is either the truth or what they are looking for effectively to learn from this digital world. So AI will play a big role, undoubtedly. There's no question about it.
Okay, thank you, Taher. So Siavash, your views on the internet in 10 years' time and digital equity.
So from a network perspective, obviously, if we're going to expand the capacity of internet with the growing needs of the hyper-connected world, we're going to have a network that looks much more wired than wireless, meaning fiber everywhere, emanating RF energy, because we're going to have dense, very dense, dense networks. That's from a kind of network perspective. And as Henry pointed out, heterogeneous. We have to stop this nonsense of, use 5G except instead of Wi-Fi and that kind of thing. Almost every generation of cellular, some people start mentioning killing one of these technologies for the benefit of the other, but they all have a place. It's going to be heterogeneous. It's going to be a combination of Wi-Fi, 5G, 6G, satellites. All of them have some benefit in some areas. In rural areas, obviously, as Marty talked about, you can use smart antennas at very high frequencies for backhaul, and then use Wi-Fi perhaps for access. So the heterogeneous, dense networks on the network side, with much more fiber infrastructure pulled to every place on the face of the planet that is possible. And hopefully those are the kind of things that governments are going to do to make them actually feasible in terms of subsidizing some of the backhaul infrastructure. And then from the business model of internet, we're going to have to change that. This eyeball-grabbing, ad-driven business model of internet needs to, and it's coming. I think we're seeing some movement away from it. Different ideas on subscription models for and revenue share, perhaps between mobile operators and application providers, but also our ability to help people distinguish, as Taher said, between beliefs and opinions and truth, right? We built internet to help people get access to truth, not disinformation. And right now, internet is dominated by disinformation. And this is something that we all have to put our minds together and address it. Otherwise, we're going to be in big trouble. We already are in big trouble. We have a very polarized society, and we're seeing very negative kind of impacts of some of the disinformation campaigns that have been done. And we have to stop that. We have to help people. We shouldn't limit by no means freedom of speech and freedom of communication over internet, but we have to have mechanisms so that people can say, okay, this is a belief, This is not a fact. This is fact. This is truth. This is a belief and an opinion, and that hopefully in the next decade we'll come up with great ideas. And I think it's definitely feasible to do that.
Thank you, Siavash. I mentioned in my introduction also that it was a question of digital literacy. We're all experts in our field, but I still, when I get a problem with my phone or my computer, I have to go and ask my kids, right? It's just the way it is. So there were two things going through my mind here. One, what we need to do to improve digital literacy, but also ask the question: is there an age divide within digital literacy? If there is, then we need to have a continuing education program for us older people as well, so that we can actually work our phones. So, Henry, I know that you, as a major philanthropist, are extremely interested in education of young people. Do you have some thoughts on that?
Sure. No. I mean, clearly there is an age divide, but the good news is it automatically self-corrects over time, because the older people die off and the younger people come in digitally literate. But there's no question that the young kids are becoming very sophisticated when it comes to digital literacy. And the key here is making it equitable so that it's not only people with the means and capacity to access all that technology, but we want to make it available to everybody. And that's something that we do focus on in our foundation, is creating accessibility to the internet and teaching the young kids and motivating them to pursue careers related to digital, whether it's being, STEM in general, but, just being computer literate, understanding software and how it's used. So yes, it's critical that we create a very broad-based education platform at very young ages to teach kids digital literacy. They want it, so it's not, you don't have to push it on them. They welcome it. So it's really a matter of training the teachers to incorporate that into the curriculum over time. And I think it will happen. It just naturally happens as the new generation comes into play. They will naturally adopt more digital platforms in their educational processes.
Okay, thank you. Do you think there's something we could do to simplify the operation of our digital devices so that this would make a major contribution to digital equity if it became easier to use?
Yes, definitely. I think artificial intelligence platforms will move in that direction to make make technology more user-friendly. I think it's definitely doable. Just having more robust error recovery techniques that simplify how you get devices working. I mean, it's not a technology hurdle that can't be overcome. I think absolutely it will over time. It just takes a lot of resources to do that. But I'm not worried that we're going to end up with people who can't use the internet because they don't have the skills. I think, again, kids just soak this up. It's remarkable at how young of an age kids, my grandchildren, who barely walk, but they know how to use the internet. So it's just a natural thing for the younger generation to adopt. So I'm not personally worried. I think we'll get there over time.
Thank you. So I'm going to now come to Aakanksha as a representative of the younger generation. So Aakanksha, your thoughts, please.
So first, I want to acknowledge that yes, it continues to be a challenge, and that we've designed a lot of these applications on phones and internet that can be hard to operate, and even my mom struggles with it, and I try to help her find content that she needs. At the same time, I think AI is moving in a direction where hopefully we'll be able to talk to computers and phones with natural language. So it would be less about following a process where you're supposed to swipe or do something, and really more about conversing with the app in the same way like we converse with other humans. And so that would be one great advance to simplifying the whole interaction. So human-computer interaction is a field which is set for disruption if we so allow it in the next decade, and we'll see how it evolves, and hopefully it will make it accessible not just in this age divide but also in the accessibility divide, because there are folks who have other disabilities, and the more we can use these technologies to bridge the divide across and give digital equity to the whole population, that would be phenomenal.
Thank you, Aakanksha. I notice that we are running out of time here, and so what I like to do, we just have a few minutes left, and we have three persons left to comment on this question. So if I could ask you to be fairly succinct in your replies, I'll come to Siavash next.
So I think the Aakanksha said it very, very, very well. I mean, this is usability on internet is going to improve with natural language processing, with use of AI and all of that. But we're always going to be trailing, as Henry said. I mean, there are new things. The older generation is going to be slower in grasping them. So it's going to be a continuous challenge for younger people to help older people with new things. I don't think that will ever end. That's perpetual. But there's a lot of, I look at my own mother and how she uses internet these days. 10 years ago, she wouldn't be able to do anything with internet. But today, she's talking on WhatsApp and Facebook and different platforms. She can send text and all of that. So I don't think we're going to have a huge issue around that with AI.
Thank you, Siavash. Taher.
Yeah, thank you. So the question is, can the older generation catch up with the younger one? I think is what we're talking about here, because the younger generation actually understands this medium much better. And again, my issue is, are we handing that generation a trusted medium? And the younger generation will, in fact, understand the medium that we're handing them, regardless of what it is, and they will learn what to trust and what not to trust, and they will continue to improve on it, whether it's access or connectivity or actually the content being served. The divide does exist, will always exist, but this is such a new world that we're building that I believe actually the younger generation will be a lot more in tune to it than us.
So, Taher, you make a very interesting point there. The job of the older generation is often to protect the younger generation as they learn about the big wide world and the threats that exist. Surely the problem has to be that yes, they learn fast, but they can also make some terrible mistakes on the way. And the magnitude of those mistakes can be quite large with the access to the internet. Did you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah. The idea here is it is always the case that 80 or 90% of the society are going to want the right things to happen. So the force of good usually wins. You know, if you go back 100 years, the idea of a bank was totally untrusted. Today, we take banks as part of the society. We all go to it's kind of part of the world. I think this is not very different in this case. I think over the generations, and 10 years is a good time frame, the new generations who are going to continue to build this society will in fact improve the trust in it, because that's what most of them desire.
Brilliant. Thank you. So Marty, I think the last word goes to you. We have just 2 minutes before the end of the session. So Marty, your thoughts, please.
Well, first of all, Henry, I'd like to remark that this older person is not planning on dying off very soon. So, but the biggest comment I can make is that we somehow are allowing engineers to create all of the user interfaces, and that's a huge mistake. Engineers are great at engineering. Designers ought to specialize in these interfaces and recognize that every person alive today, every person that ever has lived before, is different from every other person, and somehow the interfaces have to accommodate everybody and not discriminate between old people and young people. Where do we ever get that idea that neurons die off when you get older? As you were intimating, David, some of us older people have maybe slower, but we've accumulated a little wisdom in the past.
Totally agree, Marty. So thank you for those comments. So I would like to wrap up the session with a huge vote of thanks to a fascinating panel, to Henry Samueli, Siavash Alamouti, Aakanksha Chowdhery, Taher, Elgamal, and Marty Cooper. Your comments have been imbued with wisdom, shall we say. And we've covered a huge amount of ground, and I hope the online audience has enjoyed it as much as I have. So thank you very much, and see you on the next.
Thank you, David.